Fair Housing Month Spotlight. In honor of April being Fair Housing Month, we're excited to present a panel of local fair housing champions. Sally Santangelo, Executive Director of CNY Fair Housing. Caitlin Wright, Executive Director of CNY Land Bank. And I also have Erin, I'm going to hope I can say your name totally here, your last name. I'm just looking at my notes. I'm sorry. Right here. Erin is from Home Headquarters, Persky, and she's the Chief Lending Officer from Home Headquarters. So these are our three speakers today. The seminar will explore local fair housing issues and the solutions being developed to address them. Each speaker will present for maybe 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A. Our first speaker is Sally Santangelo, Executive Director of CNY Fair Housing, a fair housing organization based in Syracuse and serving 14 counties of central and northern New York. Sally started with the organization in 2011 as fair housing investigator and later served as the Director of Enforcement. Under her tenure, the agency investigation and litigation activities have led to important cases addressing sexual harassment and national origin and disability discrimination, while the agency's policy efforts have led to groundbreaking research on exclusionary zoning, as well as successful advocacy for statewide sources of income protection. She currently serves as the Board of Directors on the National Fair Housing Alliance and is chair of the National Enforcement Advisory Committee. Sally, we'd love to hear you speak, and I think you have a PowerPoint also.
I do have a PowerPoint. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to everyone at GSAR and especially Danielle for continuing to invite me back. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you all in honor of Fair Housing Month. And sometimes I'll say to a room, happy Fair Housing Month to all who celebrate, and usually I'm the only one, but it's good to be among a crowd of folks who are here to recognize the importance of fair housing and in our housing market, and the importance of recognizing the protections that people have based on their fair housing rights, and the work we need to do to make sure that the promise of the Fair Housing Act is realized. The Fair Housing Act was signed into law on April 11th, 1968, a week after the death of Martin Luther King. And despite the fact that we've had this law in place for almost 56 years now, we still have a lot of work to do in our community, including in the real estate market. So I'm going to talk today about some of the trends that we've seen really over the last 5 years in terms of fair housing, in particular in the real estate market. Some of you saw a version of this presentation at GSAR. So let me share my screen. Okay. So to say that it's been an interesting few years in the housing market is a bit of an understatement. What I wanted to focus on is really what we've kind of have learned from the last few years with the changes in the housing market, particularly related to COVID and the recovery from COVID, and what that means for fair housing and for improving housing opportunity. So first, a little bit about us. Our organization, we've been around for over 30 years. We are located in Syracuse, but serve these 14 counties of central and upstate New York. And we work to eliminate housing discrimination and promote housing opportunity. Most of our funding comes from HUD, as well as New York State, and many of the communities we serve, including the city of Syracuse and Onondaga County. And We work to eliminate housing discrimination in a few ways. We investigate complaints of discrimination. We, as part of those investigations, of course, we conduct undercover testing, both based on complaints as well as audit-based testing in all aspects of the housing market, rentals, sales, lending, insurance, accessible design and construction. We conduct this year, probably almost 200 tests for housing discrimination in our service area. We do a lot of counseling and advocacy, particularly around the areas of reasonable accommodations and modifications for tenants with disabilities to help them have the full use of their housing. We have 2 attorneys on staff who provide legal representation to victims of discrimination, and we file cases in state and federal court, as well as administrative complaints with HUD, or the New York State Division of Human Rights. We do a lot of education and outreach. And then lastly, we do research and policy advocacy to improve housing opportunity. Most recently, we've been working around exclusionary zoning, conducting analyses about looking at measuring the extent to which zoning hinders the development of housing in our communities. And I'll talk a little more about that. So I want to, kind of start by talking about where we were prior to COVID, and where we've been, where we've come. So looking back 5 years, the year before COVID was also the same time when the Newsday investigation came out, the Long Island Divided investigation came out, which was released in November of 2019, which identified extensive discriminatory practices in the real estate market on Long Island. And I'm sure folks on here are aware. If you are not aware of this investigation and this study, I recommend, of course, reading the report and watching. There's a great video documentary done on this. And what that study found was that discriminatory practices like steering and differential treatment were widespread, particularly for African American home buyers, and as well as Hispanic home buyers. What they found was that African American testers that were posing as home buyers encountered discrimination 49% of the time, which is an astounding level of discriminatory practices when nearly half of the people looking to buy a house are facing discrimination. That is an extraordinary impact on our housing market. And what was found was that individuals were steered to particular neighborhoods. They were told different information about their neighborhood based on their protected class. For example, in one instance, a Black home buyer was looking to mentioned maybe purchasing a house or interested in a particular area, and an agent told the Black home buyer that they didn't want to, that it was a nice neighborhood and they should, consider moving there. Then a white home buyer inquired about the same neighborhood, and they were given a text, ended up receiving a text from the real estate agent later that day, warning them that they might not want to move into that neighborhood because there was a lot of gang activity. That's just one example. There were a number of other examples of differences in information folks were given about school districts, whether they were told if it was a good school district or not, and differences in the listings that people were provided that steered them to particular areas. And one of the more shocking things in this investigation was the extent to which the agents knowingly violated fair housing laws, where they actually identified to the particularly to the white home buyers that there is this thing called fair housing laws, and I'm not supposed to steer you or tell you, steer you to a particular neighborhood, but, and then they went and violated the law, which really showed how much more we need to do in terms of obviously not just education because they knew, but also in terms of enforcement. Because it really pointed to the fact that education was insufficient in changing these practices, and changing the behavior and of those agents. So about the same time, a new fair housing program, which had already been planned, was piloted. And in New York State, a new program funded initially by the Attorney General's office that provided more funding for the fair housing organizations like ours in New York State. There are 6 of us, referred to as FIP organizations, under the meaning we receive funding under the Fair Housing Initiatives program. And you'll see here on the map the service that the areas that the FIP organizations covered. And these pilot programs, again, first funded by the AG's office, started in 2020 and now funded through New York State Homes and Community Renewal, allowed an expansion of our fair housing work, not just geographically. You can see here on the map, there was additional counties that we were able to provide services in across the state among the 6 groups. But also allowed us to expand the amount of testing we were doing, and increased our staff significantly. Statewide, these programs allowed us to add among the 6 groups a number of new staff members and conduct a number of additional tests. This is just a 1-year snapshot of that. We continue to work on this and receive this funding, and it's become a crucial part of the work we do, particularly when it comes to enforcing source of income laws. Statewide source of income, because it is only a statewide legislation, statewide protected class, we are unable to use HUD funding to conduct source of income enforcement in the same way that we can use our federal funding for things like race discrimination or disability discrimination that are covered under federal law. So it's really allowed us an expansion. Of course, there remains a lot of work to be done. Also, prior to COVID and really coinciding at the time of the Newsday investigation, there was remained a significant gap in Black and white homeownership. And at that time, in 2019, it was a 30-point gap in Black and white homeownership, which was nationwide, which was greater than when the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. Excuse me. An analysis showed that the homeownership rate for Black college graduates was actually lower than the homeownership rate for white high school dropouts, which shows that it is obviously not a function of employment or income that we continue to have these homeownership gaps, but really a function of the historic legacy of practices like redlining, restrictive covenants, and urban renewal that deprived Black families of the same household wealth that white families were able to build over the last century. So we have this, excuse me, homeownership gap, and that perpetuated, even though we had 50 years of fair housing laws and fair housing protections until that point. But what COVID did, for at least the beginning, was the economic recovery or economic policies that were part of COVID mitigation. Really, we started to see a decrease in that homeownership gap nationwide. And so in the first 2 years, from 2019 to 2021, there began to be a slight increase in homeownership rates for Black and Latino home buyers. And still also an increase in homeownership rates for white home buyers, but it was much less than that for Black and Latino home buyers. You'll see here basically 2 different data sources identifying the change in homeownership rate by race and ethnicity in just those 2 years. So you started to see that, and that's because interest rates were really low. There was stimulus dollars that were helping people have money for down payments. There was pauses in student loan payments that led to more household income, and really started to see homeownership becoming possible for more people. There was also a greater interest in homeownership, particularly in the early years of the pandemic, because we were home, right? And so people wanted to own their own home, have that control, because our home became also our workplace, and also our schools. And so we started to see this increase. When you look state by state, this shows the change in homeownership rates state by state. And the black on the left, the black homeownership rate increased in 40 states in those 2 years. You'll see New York in the light blue here. There was a moderate increase in some states. You saw a much greater increase. Only a handful of states was there a decline in homeownership rates among Black households. Similarly, the Latino homeownership rate also increased in 41 states during that same period. But unfortunately, the market changed, and things changed pretty quickly and pretty significantly. And since that peak in 2021, where we started to see that narrowing gap, the homeownership gap has now actually increased. The Black-white homeownership rate gap is actually increased and is now greater than it has been in a decade. And the challenges that people are facing now in purchasing homes are experienced even greater for Black home, Black home buyers in particular. And there's a few reasons why, which I'll talk about in a moment. Locally, the racial homeownership gap is worse than it is nationally. The national homeownership gap right now is 28%. In New York, the gap is 33%. And in Syracuse metro area, the racial homeownership gap is 42%. So significantly higher than what we see across the country. And in large part, because we continue to feel the impacts and legacy of historic systemic racism and discrimination greater than you see in a lot of communities that have developed more recently, and haven't had the same have been able to recover a little more from those historic practices, or maybe didn't experience them to the extent that we did in Syracuse and other northeastern and midwestern cities. So what are those things happening in the housing market that have made it so hard for people? Obviously, you all know these things. So first is, mortgage rates have been increasing, and making it, adding another barrier to purchasing a home. And median sale prices have increased dramatically. These are U.S. Figures. The local map, the local chart on the bottom would be show an even steeper incline in terms of what we've experienced in median sale prices in central New York. But it's making it harder and harder for people to purchase, and making harder and harder for everyone to purchase. But there's a few things that are particularly impacting borrowers of color and home buyers of color that are, that we need to be concerned about, and that have significant fair housing implications. First is appraisal bias. And, there's been some great investigations by some of our counterparts in across the country, looking at how appraisals of homes are impacted by the race of the homeowners, and showing that homes owned by Black homeowners are undervalued, which strips those families of their wealth. I just had an appraisal on my house a couple of weeks ago, and it's pretty horrific to think that that might have been different if my skin color was different, and that the impact of that is significant in terms of how it affects a family and their ability to access the wealth that they've accumulated by participating in what we consider the American dream. One examination or one investigation in California, there was a family who Black family who had their home appraised, and they thought that the appraisal seemed a little low for what they had been putting into the house. So they whitewashed their house, removed any family photos, artwork, or books that would indicate that it was owned by a Black family. They had the house appraised, or they had some white friends pose as the homeowner, and they had the house appraised again, and it came back at about $500,000 higher in the appraisal after that. They filed a complaint, and they settled out of court. So we don't know the results of that complaint, but they were able to hopefully get some relief in that. The other issue that we saw over the last couple of years, particularly when there's so few houses available for people to purchase, were things like love letters, which introduced bias into the home buying process by buyers trying to get an advantage in a really competitive market, and hoping that a seller is going to pick them for the purchase of their purchase offer. And so those love letters introduce bias into the process by making their personal characteristics a basis for accepting a purchase offer. Of course, we know that love letters should not be used, but we also know that we know that there ends up being communication sometimes between buyers and sellers that is influencing that process. And then lastly, the competitive market that we've had, which favors cash buyers and conventional loans in particular, and makes it difficult to purchase homes with an FHA or VA loan, and which are disproportionately and continue to be disproportionately used by Black and Hispanic households. And that, for a while, I was looking at listings and just seeing just how many of them said no FHA or VA, or would say, conventional only, and really impacting what homes were available for first-time home buyers, and often first-generation home buyers that were using those FHA and VA loans. So we've been seeing these trends and these impacts that not just individual acts of discrimination, but a market that just makes it really, really hard to purchase a home, and also a market that favors existing homeowners. And if you're lucky enough to own a home, and lucky enough, which is often determined by whether your parents were able to own a home, then you've seen your value of that home, skyrocket in the last few years. As I said, I had my house appraised a few weeks ago. The value of my home has doubled in the amount of time since I purchased it. And that is when when housing is our primary means to increase household wealth, and then we predicate whether you can have housing based on people's race, then we've created this huge unlevel playing field in terms of the access to opportunity that people have. The other issue we've been focusing on, as I said, is related to zoning. As our housing market gets, more and more competitive, and we've lost a lot of housing units, and particularly in multifamily housing, due to conditions issues. We frankly need more housing, and we need more of every type of housing. So we look at really, kind of, when we talk about zoning, three types of housing: our traditional single family detached homes, what we refer to as missing middle housing, which are things like townhouses, small apartment buildings, maybe condos, and then multifamily housing, which are larger buildings, maybe an apartment complex. A suburban apartment complex could be a loft that's been converted into apartments, could be an older building, like you'll see on the top right, that was built as multifamily housing. And we've been looking at how our zoning policies and decisions about how we build and what we build is impacting that housing market, because we're seeing people struggling to find housing no matter where they are in the housing market, whether that's a first-time home buyer, whether that's a renter, whether that's a senior who wants to sell their house and move into an apartment, and sell their home, which would then maybe become available for a first-time home buyer. Across the board, we don't have enough housing. So we conducted this analysis last year that was looked at and measured the extent to which zoning limits different types of housing. So this map shows areas where this is a map of Onondaga County, and we created the first countywide zoning map in existence. We don't have one zoning code in Onondaga County. We have 34 zoning codes for each municipality, every town, village in the city of Syracuse, except for one town, Otisco, which does not have zoning. But every municipality. And so we found a way to measure those against each other. And what this shows is areas where there is no housing allowed. And we looked at what we called urbanized areas that had infrastructure, like sewer lines and things like that. So there's areas where no housing is allowed at all by right, meaning you do not have to have a special permit to build that housing. Those areas are in gray. Areas where the only housing that is allowed without a special permit are detached single-family homes, which in yellow you can see is the majority of our community, particularly majority of suburban neighborhoods, where only single-family detached housing is allowed. That's 80% of the urbanized land. And then in the maroon color, you'll see areas where that missing middle housing, those townhouses and condos and small apartment buildings are allowed by right. In the maroon areas, again, not a lot in the suburban communities. And then lastly, you'll see in purple the areas where multifamily housing is allowed by right. Apartment buildings are allowed. And in this, all of Onondaga County, that type of housing is only allowed on 3% of the land. And when you look at the towns outside of the city of Syracuse, that type of housing is only allowed on 1% of the land. Which means it's almost impossible to build multifamily housing without having to jump through additional hoops, which increase the cost of housing, the cost of development, and also allow opportunities for NIMBYism to stop the development of that housing. And what's worse yet is that 1% of the land that is available most of it is already actually built on. Most of it already has multifamily housing on it, and it's not that we can add more to it because most of it is already built. So this drives up the cost of housing, particularly for that missing middle and multifamily housing, makes it harder to build. Now, you might look at this and say, oh, but it's okay. We can build lots of single family detached homes on all of these properties, on all of this area that is yellow. Except we also make it really hard and expensive to build single family housing as well, in particular by requiring large lot sizes and sometimes even having requiring large dwelling sizes. So for the single family housing market, we looked at how zoning limited the lot size for new multifamily or new single family homes. And this map shows the minimum lot size for different areas and different zoning districts in the county. And you'll see the lightest pink requires a minimum lot size of less than 1/8 of an acre, going all the way up to the darkest purple, which requires a minimum lot size of at least 1 acre. And again, which makes it hard to build more affordable single family homes as well that would help first time home buyers and get them an opportunity to maybe purchase where they wouldn't be able to afford those large homes on large lots. So that minimum lot size of 1 acre is 24% of our land that's zoned for single family homes. Um, and what's again particularly problematic here is that is most of the undeveloped land. So most of the areas that aren't already developed with single family houses are requiring those really large lots, making it more expensive and more difficult for home buyers in particular, and first time home buyers in particular. So what do we do about that? And it continues to pose a challenge. And what has been happening is, as you know, we released the study a year ago, and we've actually gone backwards since. We actually are seeing more restrictions on building housing, and more restrictions in particular on building multifamily housing. There are towns that are issuing moratoriums now on building any new multifamily housing, requiring special use permits in areas that weren't previously required. And again, looking to really keep more people from being able to live in their communities, or restrict who can live in their communities based on their income, and oftentimes based on their race, their national origin, their disability as well. So we have a lot of work to do. I'll wrap up there. And in terms of making sure our housing market is meeting everyone's needs, because it isn't right now. It clearly is not. And the way we've been doing things isn't working in terms of providing housing opportunity for everyone, and pretty soon for anyone at the rate that we're going. Want to just end by putting in a little plug for our celebration of Fair Housing Month, which is our birdhouses for Fair Housing fundraiser, which is less than 2 weeks away. I don't know how that's come along so quickly, but on April 17th at Sky Armory, we'll have a live auction of some amazing birdhouses. The birdhouses have been coming in and they're fantastic. We have 5 more being delivered by some architects next week that I can't wait to see. Of course, I can't wait to see my own, which is not yet finished also, but we'll see how that goes this weekend. And tickets are just $30 in advance and $40 at the door. And I'll throw the link in the chat to make sure you have access to that. We cannot take any sponsorships from anyone in the housing industry, but you can come to the event. Enjoy yourself, buy a birdhouse. We'll have silent auction as well. And then we'll also have, food and cocktails, lots of bird themed cocktails that we have for you. So,
Sally, this sounds absolutely fabulous. And they make great housewarming gifts. I've purchased one before and done that, just so it's a great idea. You know, I wish that we had some idea of what FHA and Fannie Mae may try to do to help us with first-time buyers, because we're all struggling. We write the FHA offers, we write the VA offers, and it's just the seller has a choice to choose what they like, and we really have a hard time, and we don't want this to happen. I wish that there were some kind of properties that could be built that would only be designated to a first-time buyer or some kind of income. It's hard. Construction is very expensive today, so it's really hard. I'm not sure what FHA and Fannie Mae is going to do, but I do think there'll be some changes.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge and something we'll talk with our national partners about. And and maybe I'll put this on the agenda for the National Enforcement Advisory Committee to discuss, because I know it is an issue in a lot of communities, certainly not just our own. And there does need to be, changes made to make it easier for folks to purchase homes with these programs, because as I said, it's not going well now for folks. And so we need to see some changes at the national level as well.
Yes, that would be great. Danielle, are there any questions?
Not at the moment. I am just asking if everybody could hold them until the end. All three panelists are going to stay on, and we're going to do an open forum kind of questions at the end. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat or use the raise hand feature after our third speaker, and we'll open it up to a panel type discussion.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, our next speaker is Aaron Persky, Chief Leading Officer of Home Headquarters. Aaron?
Good morning. Thank you, Nancy. Yes, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the Chief Lending Officer over at Home Headquarters. For those of you who may not know Home Headquarters, we are a 28-year-old nonprofit housing and community development institution, a CDFI. We help fill the gaps in home ownership and in the housing market in general. We have lending programs, education services, as well as some property development that we do. So just wanted to speak to some of those programs with you all today and some of our services that we provide. I'm the Chief Lending Officer, but I think our most important piece is our homeownership education, our home buyer education that we provide. They're all HUD certified counselors. We have live and local classes that are 2-hour sessions for 2 times a week, once a month, and it really is a great way to get buyers educated on the entire process. Let folks know what's out there, what's available to them, as far as, banks and credit unions that are available, and, other resources, inspections, realtors, things of the like. So it's a great place for folks to start in the home buying process, so that they really know what they're getting into when it comes to owning a home. We also offer mortgages. So our first-time home buyer program is really geared toward first-time home buyers. We keep it very cost effective for them. We only require 2% down. There's no monthly mortgage insurance. So that's a huge, savings for folks. And we do require the education to be able to provide that funding to them, so that we know that they're really ready for home ownership. And then we have closing cost assistance, and that is available for anyone, whether it's outside, whether they're obtaining their mortgage through another lender or they're obtaining their mortgage through us. We do always have something available for someone who might need some additional assistance and help. We partner with the Syracuse Financial Empowerment Center. So if someone is not quite ready for home buying, or maybe they need a little help, or maybe they already own a home and they just need, to focus on getting budgeting, down pat, and just trying to get back on their feet from something. The Financial Empowerment Center has some great counselors over there that will work with the client to get whatever their needs are met, as far as budgeting, credit. They do kind of like a walk, hand in hand, meetings, and really make sure that they're meeting their goals, as far as whatever that might be, whether, again, it's to get ready for home buying, or if they're already a homeowner and just need to get back on their feet, or just want to get, more education about that piece. And we have a wide variety of home improvement programs. We lend across all of New York State. So, and we have a multitude of programs that are available for people that need assistance, whether they have owned their home for 20 years or just closed on it last month and they need a roof. We really are not appraisal or equity driven in those things. So it's really helpful, if someone, like I said, closed last month and they have sewer backup or something, and it's an urgent item, they can come to us for assistance, and we can help them out to make sure that they can maintain that home ownership and really maintain that wealth that they've already built into their home. And again, that's not appraisal or equity driven. So, if they need the assistance, we're there to help them. And that is not dependent on the value of their home. So I think that's a huge piece of it. We are actually the leader of home improvement lending to the people of color in the city of Syracuse. So I think that speaks highly to kind of what we do. We're here to help the people with really whatever their needs are, from really from start to finish. So from the beginning of their home buying journey all the way through, if whatever they need, we're really here to help them. We are also in the process of building over 40 homes this year. So we have over 40 homes that are in the process, in the pipeline, ready to be built. We have broken ground on 3 in Solvay. So those are over on Charles Ave. We have them kind of, clustered all around the city and just outside. And we are happy to provide financing to the people who are interested in them. We are happy to, sell them to folks that might have financing elsewhere. There are some, 2 in Solvay will be sold at market rate. And then there is one that has to be sold to an income eligible first time home buyer. But in some of those other homes do also have to be income qualified. So they might have to be under a certain area, maybe in income. But I personally am happy to kind of look at those folks for everybody and make sure that they would fit into what we need as far as what might have gone into the home. But we kind of do it all, from, like I said, from start to finish, building the home buyer education. The mortgages are available. Closing cost assistance is available for anyone who needs it, again, regardless of financing. And then home improvement, should they need something along the way. Counseling, credit, all of those things. We're kind of a one-stop shop. It's a wide variety of us that are happy to help with whatever, folks might need. So we thank you for letting us be a part of the GSAR, and we're here to help anyone that we need things with. And I apologize for the lack of PowerPoint. I was a last minute addition to the panel today. But any questions that you have for me, I'm happy to answer them at the end.
Okay, Erin, I do have one thing though, a
Yes.
testimonial. So I'm in the middle of closing a deal with you. I had a listing and a buyer brought a buyer who has gone through your whole closing cost and buyer assistance program, and it's really going very smoothly. It's an opportunity for a first-time buyer to purchase a house. So I also wonder if you still do investment properties for any somebody who's buying investment.
We do. Yep.
Okay.
We do offer that as well. Yeah, investors, like I said, we're statewide too. So we have separate programs in Buffalo, in Erie, Albany, kind of all over the place. So yes, we do still do investment properties as well.
Okay, I'm sure there'll be questions after this. Are we finished with our third speaker? Our final speaker is Caitlin Wright, is the founding executive director of Greater Syracuse Land Bank and president of the New York Land Bank Association, representing 29 land banks across the state. During her tenure, a number of vacant buildings in Syracuse has been reduced by 44%, and the land bank has returned over 1,300 properties to the tax rolls and productive use. Prior to joining the land bank, she worked as land use planner for the city of Syracuse. She and her husband live in Eastwood, where she currently volunteers as president of the Eastwood Neighborhood Association. Welcome, Caitlin. It is so wonderful to see you, my friend. You're
Thank
on.
you, Nancy. Thank you very much. Nancy also serves on the board of directors of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. She's a very busy lady, so I enjoy getting to work with you.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me today. I think most of you are probably familiar with the land bank, at least to some degree. We're a public authority created by the city and the county to deal with vacant and abandoned properties. And there are particular neighborhoods in Syracuse that are really plagued with vacant and abandoned properties and lack of property maintenance and neglected properties, and this kind of is kind of a negative feedback loop. If you have a vacant house next door, you're a little less likely to invest in painting your house, et cetera, and it just kind of carries down the block. And so that's the problem that we are trying to address here. And the way we do that is by acquiring properties through the city's tax foreclosure process. We also occasionally acquire properties through the county's tax foreclosure process out in the other towns and villages. And we do occasionally purchase properties, and from time to time we get properties donated to us as well. But the idea is that by taking ownership, we can control the outcomes much better than we could back when the city had an auction. Back 20 years ago when the city was auctioning properties off, we saw a lot of folks come in from out of town, cash buyers that were willing to accept a high level of risk and buy properties sight unseen. And sometimes they would get in there and realize, oh, this house needs a lot more work than I anticipated. And it would just continue to sit there and it would end up in the auction again 2 years later. So that's the cycle that we're trying to break. When we get properties into the land bank, we clean out all the trash and debris. We have a construction manager that goes through and drafts up a scope of work, letting people know what it's going to need at a bare minimum to bring it up to code. And then when we can market it, we're marketing it from a more knowledgeable position, and we can screen our buyers to see that they have the financing and the skills to handle this project. And we are basically a middleman like that, putting these fixer-uppers out there on the market. We still need private investors and private buyers to purchase these and to invest their blood, sweat, and tears into renovating them. And that's kind of how we get to scale. So we have groups like Home Headquarters that we partner with. Housing Visions also buys properties from us. Jubilee Homes, they all do beautiful work with grant-funded projects, but there's only so much grant money to go around, and we can address a handful of properties each year that way. But when we first got started, there were 1,800 vacant buildings in the city of Syracuse. And we said, if we're going to address the scale of this problem, we really need to get the private sector involved as well, and essentially crowdfund neighborhood revitalization. And so that's what we've done. Like I said, we've sold a lot of properties to our nonprofit partners, but the vast majority of the properties we've sold are just to regular people. Over 80% of our buyers live in Syracuse or Onondaga County. We prefer to sell to local people. The other nice thing about switching to the land bank instead of an auction, not only can we screen our buyers, but we also don't have to sell to the highest bidder. So our board, when they vote on selling properties, they prefer local over out of town. They prefer owner occupied over rentals. And so all of those decisions, one property at a time, are meant to address revitalizing the neighborhood. And our customers are our buyers, of course, but I also think of our customers as the neighbors. Sally was talking about people being robbed of home equity and the opportunity to grow wealth. Having a vacant building next door is robbing you of the opportunity to grow household wealth. Every vacant building that we remove is helping to stabilize the surrounding property values. And then when home headquarters and other folks come in and build new houses, that's actually helping to grow the surrounding property values. So it's not just the family that's buying that house that's benefiting, it's all the neighbors on that block that are benefiting as well. Like Nancy said, we've sold over 1,300 properties so far. We've done over 600 demolitions, but we still have a long way to go. There's still 1,000 vacant buildings in the city of Syracuse. And we still have an extraordinary housing crisis. It's funny on the one hand to say that we have too many housing units because we have all these vacant housing units, but we are having a crisis of not having enough good housing in the city of Syracuse and in the rest of Onondaga County as well. So we are simultaneously dealing with this excess by doing demolitions, but also putting together as many shovel-ready sites as we can for new construction. We have about 800 properties in our inventory right now, down from a peak of 1,200 at one time. And over the years, our inventory has shifted, used to be about 50-50 vacant lots and buildings. And now we have about 550 vacant lots and 150 buildings. Half of those buildings are demolition candidates that we're getting to as quickly as we can with grant money. The other half, we have about 20 that are actively listed for sale, and a handful that we're putting some stabilization resources into that will be listed as soon as we're done replacing the roof, siding, windows, doing foundation repair. So, and then the rest of those are already under contract waiting to close. So we don't have a whole lot of buildings in our inventory right now. I anticipate that that will change starting this summer. You all have probably been watching the results of the Tyler versus Hennepin County Supreme Court decision. It's dramatically changed the way property tax foreclosures work in New York State and about a dozen other states. And so the city's tax foreclosure pipeline and the county's tax foreclosure pipeline have been on hold for about a year now while they figure out how to reinvent the process to comply with Tyler. The city has just resumed, and I'm expecting that we'll see properties flowing into the land bank again this summer. And so while we only have 20 listings right now, hopefully later this year, you'll see that we have a lot more properties available. Because we sell them as fixer-uppers, though, I will say it's not a product that's for everyone. When I say fixer-uppers, I mean extreme fixer-uppers. These are houses that have been vacant for quite a while. And not everybody has the time or financial capacity or patience to manage a project like that. So we are always looking to work with our nonprofit housing partners and with other private investors to do renovations and new construction that will then result in a move-in ready house going on the market. So we're trying to make sure that we're helping put a lot of move-in ready stuff on the market as well as the fixer-uppers that we sell. Because just not everybody can handle a daunting project like that. Am I missing anything, Nancy?
I was muted. No, no, I think that many times when we look at somebody, owner occupant is always special. If I like how you handle if somebody out of the area wants to purchase the house that you encourage them, you better come and look at it first, and we need a local supervisor or contractor who's going to fix it to just make sure, because the one thing is you don't want to take these properties back. You want to make sure whoever that buyer is going to fulfill their responsibility and understand it. So I like that. It's also hard to go for financing, and the amount of money that comes into the land bank and the grants that you need to make sure that you can tear down or demolish a house that could be $25,000-$30,000 to do that, because asbestos, all the stuff that's in there. So it's a daunting, it's a lot of work. And I just am so enamored by how you handle this. And you do all the vetting so that when the directors can say yes or no to a buyer or something that's coming in front of us, that it's already been vetted. So I find that you're just very good for what the city needs.
Thank you. I should mention, you just mentioned financing and lending. Home headquarters has been a huge resource for our buyers. When we first got started, we were concerned about how would folks finance these renovations, because they need a lot of work. It's not something that you might approach with a typical 203K loan. It's more than that. And Home Headquarters put together a great loan product for our buyers. They will do a mortgage that's combined for your purchase and renovations, and obviously pay out at closing what's needed for the purchase, and then the rest in progress draws as the contractor makes progress. And so they've been a huge help with that. Owner occupants still only have to put 2% down on a loan like that. That's hard to find anywhere else. And I think investors are putting 10% down, and they're only offering this for local investors. It's been a great help to make these projects feasible, and kind of, you know, if we're telling you this house needs $120,000 worth of renovations, folks are going to need to be able to finance that. And if it wasn't for them providing this financing vehicle, I don't think we would have sold nearly as many as we have.
Mm-hmm. I think it's amazing how the three of our speakers today are so invested in making our area, our city, our county more productive, more opportunities that maybe many of you didn't realize were available. And now we have a wealth of knowledge, and appreciate your time, all of you, the three experts here that are just amazing on what you're offering. Are there any questions at all?
I do have a couple questions, and I will also open it up. So if anybody does have questions, use the raise hand function and I'll call on you, or type them in the chat and I will read them in order. But the first two questions I got were the same. Yes, Sally has provided me with her slides, so I will send those out to you all later today once this call is over. So you will be getting those. And the next question I had is for Aaron at Home Headquarters. Are agents allowed to or welcome to take the Home Headquarters educational seminars and classes?
Absolutely. Yeah, anyone is welcome to take them. And we actually are usually always looking for folks that, you know, might want to speak during our orientation or something like that. So, you know, Karen and I can certainly get out any information for those classes. The schedule is available online at homehq.org, and that is under the home buyer tab under education and counseling. So all of the sessions are listed right on there, but there's a fee to take the course, but it's a really helpful course for anyone that's interested.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to go in order of who I see hand raised. So first I'm going to start with Patty O'Brien. Go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question.
Thank you. You've talked a lot about these programs in Onondaga County. Do these also extend to Cayuga County, or is there separate organizations for that area?
As for the, sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Kate.
I'm sorry, I didn't direct that to any one particular person.
I just want to put a plug in. There are 29 land banks across the state. We only serve Onondaga County, but there may be one where you are. And if you go to nylandbanks.org, you can find all of them linked there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sally, you guys support Cayuga County, don't you?
Yes, we serve Cayuga County.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay.
And our mortgage or anything can be used statewide. Some of our more focused home improvement programs are specific to either the city of Syracuse or Onondaga County, but we do have other programs available across the state.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Nice job. Thanks on everything.
Okay. Next person I see with their hand up is Chris Thielen.
Good morning, everyone. I just was recently introduced to a program called the NACA, NACA program. It seems very interesting and a really, what little I know about it, a very good program servicing underserved communities. I was wondering if any of the three of you or if anyone on this call could speak about it a little bit more specifically than I, just to share with the group. Seems like a terrific program.
I do, the one I'm most familiar with is in Buffalo. They do provide education and counseling out there for folks, and I believe they also do some home buyer some mortgages and some home buyer financing, but that's I'm not too familiar with their services outside of Buffalo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Chanel, I have you next.
Good morning. Thank you. I wanted to ask, when you were showing those maps, in terms of zoning and building, does infrastructure have a part to play, in terms of building? Because if you're building in the city, I know the city, you have a lot of more buildings in the city, but are they able to build outside the city, like high risers? Are they looking into that, like outside the city?
Sure. So
Or more in the city?
yeah, so the maps show what we defined as urbanized land, zoned urbanized land. So that was zoned for residential use. So we looked at areas that had existing infrastructure, like sewer infrastructure, existing roads, and looked at land use within those areas. And if zoning allowed it, you could increase density and build more dense housing in a lot of places where it's currently not allowed. There is infrastructure in a lot of, not just certainly the city has more infrastructure in terms of having more dense infrastructure. But there's certainly a lot of places that have infrastructure to support more greater density of housing that it currently isn't allowed. And so the reason you can't build a high rise on Route 31, for example, isn't because it couldn't support it. The infrastructure could support it. It's because it's not allowed as a use. You can't build an apartment complex right now you can't build one anywhere in Cicero. Not because the infrastructure doesn't support it, but because it's not allowed as a use without a special permit. And right now there's a moratorium on building any multifamily housing. But there's certainly plenty of places where the infrastructure could sustain, higher density housing, which makes housing more affordable. When you don't need as much land, then it's cheaper to build the housing because it isn't going to cost you as much in that land use. It's also going to decrease your infrastructure costs. It's really expensive to run sewer lines on a really large lot suburban development. Sprawl is really expensive when it comes to infrastructure because it requires, not just additional sewer lines, but also additional roads and additional maintenance on those roads. So it actually drives up the cost of infrastructure and drives up property taxes with it. Condos, we don't have a lot of condos, obviously, in our market. And definitely an area where we could see higher density housing that is available for home ownership and maybe more affordable than the housing that we're getting, which are these large houses on large lots.
I just wanted to add on to that. I'm sorry. In regards to when we talk about housing outside of the city, and those taxes would impact even some first-time home buyers. If more houses were built outside for first-time homeowners, because the taxes do impact their monthly cost. So I'm thinking if you're building more outside of the city, it could be a disservice to it would still disenfranchise the underserved community, because taxes. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and certainly, we of course want to see, for us, the idea is that people get to choose where they live, and that there should be, and we shouldn't be creating barriers for housing choice. And so, we'd love to see more development, and more people buying in the city. I love the work that our partners at Home Headquarters and the Land Bank are doing to improve the housing in the city to make it possible to reduce those barriers to being a home buyer and a homeowner in the city as well. So it's important that we have everything and all of the above approach to our housing market right now, given the conditions, the constraints on people are facing when looking for housing.
Perfect, thank you. So I've got one more person with their hand raised, and then I do have a question in the chat. So the person, Club Camera, you are up.
Hi, I'm Carlotta Brown. The Club Camera actually states that because I run the Real Estate Investor Club. So I guess that's how I got here in Syracuse for the last 15 years. And the club actually has been in existence since 1980. That was my question in there, because, you have a lot of investors here, which are important to our area to help rehab these houses. And my goal for the past year is encouraging people to buy houses that need to be rehabbed. So my question is to Erin, what type of investor purchase and rehab programs do you have at your organization? And are you willing to come speak to us?
Sure. So we have really just kind of a standard investment program where we're able to roll the purchase and rehab into the financing. We typically ask for, a bid from a contractor, something like that, for a scope of work to see kind of what we're looking to finance. And it's usually at just kind of a set rate. We do ask that they put 10% down as opposed to our 2% for first-time home buyers, just as an investor, with a little bit more skin in the game. And we just look at providing whatever's needed to get that home where it needs to be.
And are they required to be in a certain area or anything like that?
We typically will provide to local investors. We really like to see that they have some investment into the area as opposed to, someone maybe downstate or something like that. But, we look at everything as they come and kind of look at the overall picture of what they're looking to do.
I meant where was that a rule for where the properties would have to be that would be rehabbed?
Nope. Just same like our home, our homeowner side of things, or our owner occupant side of things. No, we work all across the state. We have partnerships, like Caitlin said, with the Syracuse Land Bank, the Albany County Land Bank, Chautauqua County Land Bank. So we have partnerships with land banks across the state.
Okay.
And as well as on the private market, we're fine kind of lending wherever is needed.
Okay, great.
Carlotta, so my husband Terry goes to your meetings.
Right.
Yes, he loves those investor meetings, and he did get a loan through Home Headquarters for I don't know if it was an investor a few years ago. So I'm with both of you there. That you have some great opportunities for investors, and we love to see them more if we can local, or if you're out of town, have somebody here managing or taking care of things.
Right. And I want to put in a plug also on April 27th, we have an all-day real estate investor conference in the North Syracuse Community Center, where we meet every month. And our site is ocreic.org.
Thank you. Thanks, Carlotta. That's great to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think we still have another question.
Yes, I have one more in the chat. And it reads, on the land bank, do the buyers need to use approved contractors to do the renos on these projects like the 203K loan requires, or can they do it on their own?
So we don't have restrictions on who you can use, but your lender probably will. And we also do check at the end to make sure that you pulled all the appropriate permits. And if you're working in the city of Syracuse, you have to use a licensed electrician and a licensed plumber for those types of work. So those are the restrictions from our perspective.
And remember that the land bank has a lien until the home is completed, right, Caitlin?
Yes,
That's
that's
probably
correct.
good to-
I failed to mention that when we sell a home as a fixer-upper, we're vetting you on the front end to make sure that you have the capacity to do the project, but then we're also monitoring to make sure that you actually do the project after closing. So at closing, you sign something called a development enforcement mortgage, and we put a lien against the property, and it says you will agree to complete the attached scope of work by X date. It's usually a year, but if it's a bigger, more complicated project, it might be more like 2 or 3 years. And if they fail to do the work, then we can foreclose and take the property back. If somebody's trying, we don't want to foreclose and take the property back if they're putting effort and money into it. We want to help them get to the finish line, and we often do have to step in and help people find additional grants and financing and better contractors if their contractors walked off the job, and that sort of thing. But if they've done nothing, I will not hesitate to foreclose and take that property back. Our lien is subordinate to any construction financing, and it says that right there in the document, but I can also sign a subordination agreement if somebody's lender needs that.
That's great information. Are there any other questions at all? Otherwise, are we all set? Okay. Otherwise, what I'd love to say is thank you all of our members for being at this. I know everybody's busy, and I appreciate your time. And our speakers, you're awesome at what you do in your businesses and what you do to help us as realtors continue and grow our business. So I thank you all. We will definitely be doing this annually. I'm hoping that, and I hope we have more people coming because it's a wealth of information. And I guess if we're all set, I thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for your time once again.